Everybody can see that okay?
Hmm.
Perfect. Okay, I think if we're all good, we can just jump right into it. Okay. Thank you guys so much for joining today. I'm going to go over a little bit about what we're going to talk about, and a little bit of background about Ride, Illinois. We'll go over some housekeeping rules, and then we're going to welcome our speaker, Carter Lavin. He's talking about his book today. If you want to win, you've got to fight. And then we're going to have a Q&A. Everybody feel free to ask as many questions as you want. We want this to kind of be a nice flowing conversation tonight. A little bit about Ride Illinois for those who are unfamiliar. We're a nonprofit whose mission is to make Illinois better through biking. We take on a bunch of initiatives through three pillars: advocacy, education, and awareness. We are leading the efforts to greatly reduce and eliminate bicyclist fatalities in Illinois. We're hoping through our hard work to become a top 5 bicycle friendly state, and just to make sure bicycling is an option for everybody in Illinois. We're a lean and mean staff of myself and Dave Simmons, executive director, as the only full-time staff. And then we have 3 part-time staff, Jessica, Ben, and Elizabeth. And then Dave, if you want to talk a little bit about a timely fashion on the
Yeah.
topic of advocacy.
Yes, Carter, you would have been very proud. This was just quickly a photo from today, a press conference with the Secretary of State. Our organization's been uh, pretty laser focused on micromobility, e-bikes, and e-motos, and making sure that legislation is not overreaching or too heavy-handed. And so we were fortunate to speak at a press conference today with the Secretary of State and then the state rep, Barbara Hernandez, and State Senator Ron Villavel, and a couple others who we've been partnering with on sensible legislation focused on micromobility to make sure these devices are not overly restricted. So this was a photo from today. I looked much nicer then with a shirt and tie, but certainly timely for tonight's conversation. Nice.
And then some just quick housekeeping rules. We'll get through these quickly. This webinar is being recorded and it'll be shared to everybody who registered. So also if anybody's coming in late, you'll be able to catch up on everything. And it will be posted on our YouTube, which will be linked at the end of the session. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, your name, city, any orgs or affiliations, so we can kind of get to know each other and have a nice conversation tonight. Be sure to be respectful of speakers and presenters. Any questions, feel free to put in the chat and we can circle back to them. There will be a Q&A at the end, so we'll have an option to unmute at the Q&A and we can go back and we'll read some of the questions that come up in the chat. If your question doesn't get answered or you have any questions after the fact, you can email info@rideillinois.org and we can circle back to your questions. And then I'm going to pass it over to Carter.
Great. Thank you so much, Savannah and Dave, for having me here, the whole Ride Illinois team. It's so great to meet you all. So great to see you all. My name is Carter Lavin. I'm the author of If You Want to Win, You've Got to Fight, A Guide to Effective Transportation Advocacy, which just came out a few months ago from Island Press. You may be familiar with some of their other books. And a little bit about me before getting into this. So I am a bike and street safety and transit advocate in the San Francisco Bay Area. For those who are familiar, this San Francisco is a big city. Right next door across the bay is Oakland. That's where I live and been organizing for many years. And I've been in the climate space, in the clean energy space, in the transportation space for nearly 2 decades now. Got started in this as a late teen working in climate, and that's a big part of how I came into transportation, as well as a kid who grew up in the suburbs. I was someone who grew up in the suburbs of New York, DC area, Philadelphia area, moved around a little bit, would visit my grandma in Deerfield, Illinois, a lot of time. And so was always kind of in this inner ring suburb where you could kind of walk. There were sidewalks, there was transit to the big city. So was always a big transportation fan, always someone who biking was liberation as, a high schooler, teenager, things like that. Worked in the solar industry for many, many years here in California. And all throughout that time period, I was advocating for things like better bike parking at my local transit station, BART out here, or better bike lanes. And slowly but surely, thing that kept coming up was this is the same skill set, that the same skills as advocating for solar policy in California against our gigantic utilities that I was doing to mobilize people and get them to travel hundreds of miles to show up to a protest for 40 minutes to make news, and getting a bike lane installed in my city or getting a bike parking rack installed. These were a lot of the same fundamentals that were going on there. And somewhere along the line, I switched from working in solar to uh, training advocates across the country with a focus on transportation, biking, street safety, because to be very blunt, we are right as a movement. The things that we have the facts on our side, we have the truth on our side, and we have the moral high ground. When we talk about how we want our communities to be better places for people to get around by bike under their own power, that's good. That is an objectively good thing to say, well, kids and seniors and everyone in between, people of all ages and abilities should do that. And it's a terrible tragedy when people are killed by cars. We are right to say all those things. And being right doesn't win you stuff. If all it took was being right, we would have won everything by now. We'd be in that utopia that we want to be in. However, it takes more than just being right. And so I was approached, so I've been training advocates to get a little bit better at this. I've been leading this advocacy group in the 9-county Bay Area, which covers hundreds and hundreds of miles and a couple million people in our kind of transportation shed, so to speak, and was writing a lot about this. And eventually, Island Press approached me. They said, "Hey, would you like to write a book for us?" I said, "Oh my God, this is a book deal." They said, "No, this is a invitation to submit a book proposal." I said, "What's that?" It was a whole thing. Um, and then, I started writing the book. And a big part of this process, I knew what worked for me in Oakland and California, which is not everywhere in the world. Oakland is not Joliet, it's not Carbondale. There's a lot of similarities, but a big part I wanted to do is I made sure to interview successful advocates from across this country, red states, blue states, big groups, small groups, new groups. And I talked to Dave of Ride, Illinois. He was one of the first people I called to have this interview, and I pumped him with a million questions over the course of an hour. It's like, tell me everything. How did you win? How did you lose? All this great stuff. He told me a lot of great things. There's like one particular story that really made it into the book. But it was a very cool experience interviewing people all across the country from different age ranges, different backgrounds, just all sorts of different experiences. And through the interviews, figuring out, okay, what is the stuff that is true everywhere? What is the thing that is true in Springfield and Deerfield and Peoria, even in St. Louis? Like, what's the thing that's true even if you cross the state line, you're in Iowa? And so that's what made it into the book of If You Want to Win, You Gotta Fight. And just to give you a little bit of a structure organization, so the book starts with the intro in the first chapter, which is the most controversial chapter in the whole book, which is that all of this stuff, all these things that we're talking about, all the stuff that you want, I would like to cross the street and not get hit by a car, that is a political desire. Chapter 1 is just, look, we have to get comfortable with the fact that that is political because what we want impacts others. Often what we want is for others to not impact us, like very literally. And that is also a political desire. And so chapter 1 focuses on that because I know firsthand it is very hard to pass out flyers, make coalition partners, do all the work if you're just deeply uncomfortable. If you are squicked out by the very nature of like reaching out to a church, mosque, synagogue, temple, or other community group and say, "Hey, I'd like to talk to you about all this." If that's uncomfortable for you, you're going to have a very hard time doing that work. So chapter 1 focuses very much on that. We could talk a little bit about there's a part of chapter 1 talks about how we're in fact technically radicals, all of us here, which is a fun thing. Chapter 2 then says, okay, given that you want something, given that's political, like how do you translate, I want to be able to bike to the grocery store, get a gallon of milk and bike home. How do you translate that into a demand of a person? It is great to have that wish and to shout it into the ether, but it's a lot better to say, I would like this thing. Mayor, I need you to do this thing. City council, I need you to do this thing. County supervisors, I need you to do those things. And let's get people on board. So chapter 2 focuses on how to translate your goals into campaigns, and very specifically, some people here, I'm going to take a guess, even though I know for many of you we're meeting for the first time. I have a hunch you probably want more than just one thing. You probably want at least two things changed, maybe even at the same time. And so chapter two talks about how to make multiple campaigns work, how to have that not be so overwhelming. Um, Three then talks folks through contextualizing this because you are not organizing in anywhere USA. You're organizing wherever you're organizing. We have people in Riverside in this. We have Libertyville. Like those are different places. Those are also different than Chicago, even, and those are definitely different than Maine or Canada or anywhere else. And so, chapter three talks about how to like look at your situation with really clear eyes, understand what your community is doing, or maybe you're looking at a state level or county level, how to analyze these things. Because one classic example that happens, particularly in our spaces and bike spaces, is people say, well, in this other city, they just built 20 lanes of, 20 miles of bike lanes and they did it in a minute, or a kid died and then the next day they did all these things. And why can't we do that here? And so chapter three is like, yeah, let's talk about how to understand your context, which isn't to say you can't do those things. It's to say that I probably can't run a marathon tomorrow having not trained for one. So let's talk about what we need to do between here and there. Chapters four through five are how to work with your fellow people, how to get your folks together. One really great thing about Ride Illinois and your network is you are far from alone. I know sometimes when you're on a bike, you can feel like, wow, I'm the only one outside of a metal living room just going around my community. But you can get your group together. You can find the other folks, the other people on your side, bring them together and work together on this. And then very importantly, what chapter five talks about is work together in coalition. So there's, us as the bike people. When the bike people want bike lanes, like that's not shocking. I Carter Lavin, bike advocate, wants a bike lane by the street. No, duh. What is very cool is when, for example, as I talk about a little bit in the book, there's a street safety campaign I led in Oakland where I live. And we went very far and wide with our outreach to coalition partners. And we got a local Catholic church to sign on board. And for some people, they were really shocked. They said, I didn't know the Catholic Church cared about traffic violence. I was like, you think the Catholic Church wants people getting hit by cars? Like they are like, I don't know if the Pope's ever made a statement. Maybe they has. He does a lot of stuff. I'm not fully aware of everything he does. Um, but yeah, of course they don't want kids being hit by cars. It's like, okay, so let's talk to them. Let's involve with them. And learning how to do that, learning how to work together, that's a skill that takes effort. So chapter five talks through all of that because sometimes when we're those bike people, we can get in our own heads, and this is just regardless of what issue you're organizing on, it can be easy to forget that other people know different things. For example, a bollard. Maybe people in this room know what a bollard is. Most people outside of this room have no idea. And it's fine if you don't know. It's like a metal protecting, or it doesn't have to be metal. It is a protective post protecting you from cars or buildings from cars. But, chapter five talks about that. And then lastly, chapter six talks about bringing this into action through kind of a classic, well-worn strategy of inside-outside game, which is to say, if you're just some schmo in your city and there's people that you like, what happens when the mayor says, okay, great, we're talking? Like, oh, I was just so busy yelling at you. Now what? So chapter six really focuses through that, as well as the fact that there's a lot of allies all over the place. Like to use Dave and Savannah as an example, they're people who can help you. They're people who have access and they have information and saying, okay, well, how do you do your campaign in, Joliet, and say, hey, Dave, by the way, can you help me with this thing? How do you work that? Or how do you get IDOT involved or all that stuff? So chapter six is there. And then seven is very exciting. I'm talking about tactics. So at the end of the day, we still do, like, plans are nice, but you need to actually do stuff in the field, in the world. And chapter seven talks through kind of the common ones like petitions and coalition letters and all that stuff. But most importantly, it talks through how to evaluate a tactic. How do you figure out what you want to do? What are the actions to take? Because one thing, and it's a classic point of contention sometimes in groups. One thing when we're talking about tactics, like, oh, should we do a sit-in? Should we do a die-in? Should we pass out flyers? Should we do a blockade? A thing about tactics is they all work. They all produce outcomes. And so the question is not, will this work? Will this do something? It's, will this do what I want it to do? Will this do what our group needs right now? And will it not come with other baggage that we don't necessarily need right now? Like, does throwing I'm being recorded. Does throwing a water balloon of red paint at your mayor saying kids' deaths are on your hands and you're like, will that get their attention? It will definitely get their attention. It will also get a certain type of attention. It will also do a lot of other things. And so if you're like, well, we really need to get attention, it's like, okay, but if you don't need to get the other stuff, let's talk about that. And kind of relatedly, chapter 7 talks a lot about escalation, which is really tricky. It is the concept of, okay, we've done a bunch of stuff, we're still getting no, or we're still getting ignored. What do we do now? And it doesn't matter if you've been doing this for decades and decades and decades, or if you just started this the other day, figuring out how to escalate appropriately is almost always tough in advocacy spaces because you don't know. And Savannah and I could be working on a campaign. Savannah might say, "No, Carter, I really think it's time. Here's da 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 da. Here's all these things." And so that's why I'm buying a bunch of red paint right now. Um, and that's a big thing of like, how do you talk about that? Which chapter 4 talks about how to stay in community with your group as you're like sorting things out. But chapter 7 talks about all these tactics, and then it wraps up with a conclusion of like, okay, now what happens? You've gone through an entire campaign, soup to nuts. Like, now what? Fun fact: politics never ends. Transportation politics never ends. Bike politics never ends. There's backlash. There's all sorts of things. And so yeah, it's all just about 200 pages, filled with interviews from people from across the country, as well as my own experience having done this for a while. And so I'm so excited for folks to be reading it. And that's the kind of big spiel. So thank you, Savannah and Dave, for having me on. Excited to take questions and see how it goes.
Yeah, thank you so much. And now anybody is open to ask any questions. I'm excited to see what can come up in this conversation. I have one quick one to get us started. What was
Yeah.
your favorite part that you just dove in of the different chapters that you just were like, I could write a whole book about this portion?
Yeah. So um I'm a very chatty person, as you may have noticed. And so writing was easy. Editing was impossible.
Mm.
I literally turned in a manuscript that was twice as long. And they knew it was going to be twice as long. We all knew that was going to happen, but I had cut out half a book before getting to that. And like, to be clear, you're not missing out on like the director's cut of the book. It is just the stuff being like more convoluted. I am someone who speaks often in metaphor and thinks about that. And it was just, I had to take this out because a big goal was to make this book, as understandable as possible for people of a wide range of backgrounds. Like everyone on this call here has a total difference of background experiences. So removing pop culture references. I would say for me, one of the really favorite parts was at the beginning, I had a very clear, like, oh, here's like I really want to start kind of soup to nuts, like, oh, what do I even want? How do we get there? And all the way to tactics. And I basically did a lot of like voice notes while going on hikes for the first month of just like, okay, here's just all these words out. And it was, for me, an interesting experience of recognizing that we, when we learn through doing, which is how most people learn through their advocacy, we don't learn chronologically. You don't say, oh, now is the time where we make a coalition. It's like sometimes you might be just thrown into a coalition or realize, oh, I'm actually in coalition. I've never even thought about what even is a coalition, which is, a group, groups and individuals temporarily working together for a shared goal. I was like, oh, well, to even understand a coalition, we first have to understand a group. It was interesting kind of realizing how do I build this so that it can be very absorbable. And it's been nice getting reviews from folks saying this has been a shockingly easy read, considering it is a book about politics, which is not a simple topic. Um, and then, I mean, for me, one of the hardest parts was boiling it down, and I had to get rid of a lot of examples. Like, for example, I talked to Dave for an hour. We had all this back and forth, and there's like one story. And there's people who I interviewed and had all this up, and their story didn't make it in. There was this like really complicated thing that happened in Culver City in Southern California, and it was just like all this stuff. And it's this like beautiful encapsulation of it. I was like, of like just what happens with backlash and counter backlash. And there's a part where I was like, this is way too much. This is far too complicated. And to a level like most times you don't have like counter backlashes. And so it's like, for space, I think I could cut that out. But Yeah, no, that part was fun.
That's great. Thank you. Feel free if anybody has any questions, they can either put them in the chat or raise your hand and we can ask you to unmute. Oh, here we just have a question from Annette. Can you talk about your first win, the one you that got you hooked on being an advocate?
That's a good question. I haven't gotten that one yet. I so technically I lost, but it was one of the big things that like really hooked me. Um, it wasn't even my first win. This was funny. I've done so much advocacy on like a wide range of issues. Like in college, I hosted like a flash protest at a thing when it was just like I've done a bunch of stuff. But one of the ones was like, oh, there is so much space in transportation and that I can do a thing and no one's going to say, hey, you buzz off. This is our turf. Like that there's not going to be big transit being like, hey, find your own thing was so years ago, 2017, I was the extremely short version of the story is I was part of the crew of folks that ran to be delegates to the Democratic Party locally in 2016 as a response to that election. And people were like, maybe the Democratic Party could be doing better. So I was one of these people. Also, I was inside the Democratic Party. I was like, oh, wow, this is like chewing gum and popsicle sticks holding a lot of this stuff together. It was like really interesting seeing that. And one of the things that happened was I got a lot of access just because you're physically at the happy hour with the assembly member and that stuff. And there's a time of year where assembly members in California say, okay, we're coming up with the laws we're going to write. And my assembly member at the time, now Attorney General of the state of California, Rob Bonta, he put out a call like on Facebook, I think it was, saying, hey, I'm coming up with ideas of what's a policy to write. Who's got some? Like I got, 25 I do, whatever. And I came up with this really wonky thing about saying, hey, we have this Bay Bridge. It connects Oakland and San Francisco. There's bus lanes to it, but there's no lane on it. And so the bus like zips through and then just gets stuck in traffic. It's just a matter of paint. We have all these agencies, but no one's saying, hey, agencies, solve this together. And I posted that. I was like, hey, so here's this wonky thing. Could you do it? And a BART director, which is our kind of our version of the L, commented immediately, be like, yes, this would be very helpful. Our trains are like overcrowded. We need bus service. And the guy was like, cool, sounds like a good idea. Our staff will be in touch. And I got a DM and he was like, okay, so can you like draft a policy? And the book talks more about this stuff, but it was one of these moments where I was like, oh, I'm just some schlock. Like, yeah, I was technically a delegate, but that's not what he wasn't like, oh, Carter Lavin, a delegate. Like it was just, here's a good idea. This kind of was presented in the right way. And then it became okay, I'm the person pushing this policy. It's like, well, if I want to actually get it done, I need to get like the city of Oakland to endorse. That's pretty easy because I'm saying, hey, city of Oakland council, do you want a thing from other people that costs you nothing that makes your constituents' lives easier? And they're like, yeah, it costs once again, it costs me nothing. Like, yep. They're like, cool. And we just went to all these different towns. There was like 7 towns endorsed and I reached out to all these community groups and they're like, yeah, that sounds nice. I like not being in traffic. A bus is good. Like, cool. And I reach out to kind of other kind of transportation related groups and like, yeah, we'll sign on. It's like, oh, do you I have like a full-time job. Would you like to take on this campaign? They're like, no, you're doing it. I was like, okay. And as part of it, like Trans Bay Coalition, my kind of organizing home, like formed as part of it, in part to be like um this umbrella organization for a lot of these projects that don't quite fit into other types of campaign efforts. And just in doing that really helped me see that there's a lot of like people talk about like, gatekeeping in politics or smoky backfilled rooms or all that stuff. And like, I'm not saying the governor and I are braiding each other's hair and like best friends hanging out, but it really interesting being like, oh, okay, there is a lot of opportunity to be on the inside to make a change and all this stuff. And it did pass one of the state legislators. Um, COVID happened. It was a whole thing. There's a lot of reasons why it didn't get passed in the end. But just even through this process with Annette, it's a great question. Sorry for the long answer. Just in doing it helped me realize that to a certain extent, there is a lot of political will. There's a lot of people who are on our side who want what we want, and they want a lot of other things, and they're busy doing their thing. And so if you show up and say, hi, I'd like to help write the policy and do the thing and kind of act as a staffer, be sort of like as the sixth person, as I say in basketball, like I'll just be this helper, you can get a lot done. And no one's going to say, hey, where's your degree? Where's your credentials? They're like, oh no, thank you. Like it's like if you just showed up and you started doing dishes in someone's house, like they might complain, be like, hey, who are you? But they'd be like, I mean, I guess they're getting done. Like, so that was, I think, very helpful for me to realize that there was not, you could just do stuff to make the world better and you didn't have to apologize. So thank you enough for that question.
Wow, that's a great story. I wish everything happened as quick and easy as that seemed to have gone.
I mean, it was a 3-year
Well,
fight and we did lose in the end. I like, there is that kind of
the
asterisk.
follow-up.
But and and to this larger point though, from it, Trans Bay Coalition, my group, came up, and we are now one of the large. We are, depending how you slice it, like the largest transit advocacy group in our region. And when it comes time to like do the big statewide fight or mobilize to win a bill, like we are a large player. And a big thing, as I talk about in the book, chapters 2, 4, and 7 specifically, if you lose but you're still growing, your next win is a lot easier. And that's the other big part. Like there is no end to all this stuff. And so as long as you're growing, your future battles are a lot easier or bigger.
So I want to ask a question, and because I, know many of the folks on the call, and Rudy's got his hand, and this is not a plant. No, I'm curious. So, folks that are doing work in their community, if you would share a bit about a recent win on
Mm-hmm.
whatever scale, and then maybe what's next for for you and your community, and perhaps in a relatively small amount of time, Carter can offer some suggestions without knowing the context. I think it's sometimes important is to
Mm-hmm.
to get it an outsider's perspective. So would anyone be willing to dive into that? Throw out an example. I know you guys are doing the work. I see your names, but I won't. Rudy, you want to
No,
save them?
no. Well, I was gonna be worse than you and maybe put put Michael on the spot because he's talking about because I'm really interested in this too, the small, more rural areas.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering if you had an example that you were either workshopping or something specific, because
Yeah.
that's an
Yeah.
interesting question.
So my favorite thing about rural organizing or small communities, and I have example in the book that I'll talk about, but it's there's a sense of like for sometimes for advocates they can feel, oh, I'm stuck here or I'm the one weirdo, and this sucks. Like everyone has their opinion of me and that's already fixed. And it's a town where everyone knows each other, and I'm just nothing. That even if we're a bigger city, it'd be easier because stuff is more fluid. However, they're also stuck with you. And that part is, I think, really helpful to remember that it is a kind of a mutual, oh, we're here together. And that really changes the time scale. That makes it more of like, I am trying to change my neighbor's opinion about a thing, which is not a hard sale. That's a soft sale. That's like an eroding away. And so my favorite example of this comes from Megan Ramey in a pretty rural community in Oregon, which I don't know if you're familiar. So, there's the Portland metro area, and then there's just a lot of other Oregon, very rural. Um, and she said in our interview, she was like, I was the crazy bike lady in town. I was just like that one weird bike person. And she included the story in the book. And she's like, and then when COVID hit, I started leading. I was like, hey, whose kids, we need to be outside. Like, whose kids want to go for a bike ride? And she was like, she had a kid who was like at that age. So it wasn't just random person, random kids. That's not a great idea. Um, and like those local school principals, like, hey, folks, yeah, this is fine. Go for, your kids should go on this bike ride. And that really started their bike bus. And that eventually became this, um, not cataclysm, that's the wrong word, catalyst to a lot more change because now more kids were starting to be on bikes in their community. That started to make it a little bit more justifiable when they said, well, we really need to have this improvement, because people could see the kids and it is a small community. So it wasn't like, oh, that mysterious other person is doing it. They're like, oh yeah, that's Franny's kid. yeah, I get that Franny's kid is biking on that street, and with all those other kids, let's do it. And through kind of changing the culture by saying, okay, we're not a place where people bike. Okay, I bike, I'm gonna get other people bike. Now we're a place where people bike. That helped prime the setting for policy fights and budget fights, which talked about in chapter 2, which they won, and they started winning more infrastructure changes, more policy changes, which then helped get more people onto this and that. And so to this point of rural organizing or organizing in very small communities, there's there's a point of like kind of intentionally making yourself as sympathetic and as nice and gee shucks as possible. Like if you're like, look, you want me to make cupcakes for every single person, 50,000, like you don't, I mean, some people are diabetic, you shouldn't make them a cup. Like some people don't like cupcakes, but like, yeah, make friends. And they say, oh man, Michael or Dave or Savannah, they just want two things. They want to give me cupcakes. They want me to invite me to bike rides. They keep saying, "Oh, do you want me to fix up your bike? Do you want me to teach you how?" They keep inviting my kids out and offering me these cupcakes. And like, yeah, like they're stuck with us. And if you want to be that like super friendly neighbor who keeps inviting folks out in a way that's like no pressure, easy, whatever, that's great. And that kind of helps create this stuff. You know, what becomes an issue is when there's just like the very big hard sale, which in small communities, that's very tough to navigate because when someone's like, "Oh yeah, there's Dave. Dave's a jerk, and I don't like Dave," um, and they're like, "Oh, Dave's offering me cupcakes," like then it becomes this whole negative, weird thing. And so a big part is like, okay, let's make these relationships good. And I think one part, I know we have a reporter here. I'm being recorded, but something I'm comfortable saying is like in your community, there's a lot of fights that you can do that aren't, hey, let's get this bike lane fixed. Like, let's get this bike lane or this thing that now we're going to be mad at each other. You can say, hey, let's all call our state rep because Dave says this is the time to call our state rep and say, hey, can you pass the policy that does this? Or can we increase the funds for this type of budget or this other thing that like maybe the thing that you want is highly controversial in your community, but you probably want other things that are less controversial. And so you don't have to start with the hardest fight. So kind of working your way, making the friends and making the culture, picking easy fights of like, you know, there should be a bike rack at the grocery store. You know, that kind of stuff that doesn't really cost anyone anything, is a big way of just kind of ingratiating yourself with your neighbors, trying to build this momentum. And lastly, to this point, it makes something and I see your question, Michael, it makes something like really sturdy. You know, it means that it's not going to just disappear if you make that culture. And then to Michael, to your other question of how do you find the other weirdos, a wonderful, just gigantic advantage that we have as bike people is they're the other people on a bike. If they're on a bike, they're probably your friends. If they are not physically able to drive, they're probably on our team. If they have kids and the kids bike around town or bike in their cul-de-sac, they're our friends. Um, and there's also just people who are like, oh, and I care about all the other things. Like, great. Like some people, especially in small communities, like on the merchant side, like the thing they care about is getting people excited about their small community. And so if you say, oh yeah, we're getting the tour to Illinois to pull up here and have a stop on their whatever thing they got, they're like, okay, that sounds like you were saying you're going to bring 1,000 people into town and they're going to eat a lot of whatever or muffins or stay at our hotel. Like that sounds nice. And so finding friends, which chapters 3, 4, and 5 really talk about how to find that is a really key part.
That's great. Building community is so important. We try to bring that to folks too as people come in, as we get a lot of that, where do I even get started? And
Yeah.
well, we're your weirdos. We'll help you connect to
Yeah.
all the weirdos across the state.
Which also to make this more explicit, like Ride Illinois has an email list. There's probably a bunch of people on that. There's probably some people in your town that you didn't even know signed that petition that other time and all that stuff. And so, when you say, hey Dave, I'm trying to get a social ride together in my county and my thing, what do you got? Like unless Dave's about to really surprise me, he'll probably say, great, that's wonderful. Let's work together on this thing. Here, let's see this.
Yeah, and just to expand on that real quick, we have a privacy policy. We don't share contacts information, but we're always happy to kind of drop a pin, do a little radius around. So if you have information you want us to share out on your behalf, we do that quite frequently. But we,
Yeah.
we do want to respect people's privacy. But yeah, happy to help there.
Mhm.
I think we have another question in the chat. Let me pull that up real quick. From Matthew, could you possibly give advice when you're met with silence from the local government when discussing biking or walking? Our city adopted an active transportation plan about 15 years ago, but almost nothing has been done. We have the same mayor, same city engineer who both signed off on the plan, and now they're dismissing the ideas.
Yeah. So this is a real classic. And a big thing is not you particularly, but like a person's easy to ignore. It's really hard to ignore 100 people. It's really hard to ignore 1,000 people. And so part of this is even just like, and with the assumption that you like the plan, that the plan from 15 years ago is still a pretty good plan. I know maybe that's not true, but just like with that assumption, like you start, if you say, how do we get, it's like, okay, well, start talking to people in your community, maybe make a petition or a letter saying, hey, by the way, our city spent money. We put effort into this. There was that plan. We'd like to see that implemented. Here are 3 concrete steps of doing it. 1, put budget to the plan. 2, assign some staffers. That kind of thing. And okay, if the mayor and local government are ignoring you, great. Go talk to a bunch of other people. Make the mayor and the local government ignore them, because now the issue is, oh, our mayor is wasting our money doing plans that they're not going to follow through on. Our mayor is now ignoring the community members who are signing. Like, that's a big thing. Like, that's scandalous. So, oh, not only is the mayor asleep at the wheel, not doing what they're going to say, they're now ignoring a large number of the community. But if all they're doing is ignoring you and ignoring the plan that you begged and got them to do 15 years ago as just to like, here's a plan, now go away, who cares? But if it's, we got every school in town to say, hey, yeah, we actually do like the plan, or we especially like this part of the plan. Because that's a big part, especially when we're talking about like dusting off some of these plans, which is a very common thing that this stuff exists and they just collect dust on a shelf, sometimes very literally. Um, if you, as I talk around chapter 7 around escalation, like let's say that plan has a street safety element around a school, and let's say a kid is killed on that area right now, and that's a terrible tragedy. And right now, if you said, hey, everyone, here's a plan for 15 years ago, our mayor didn't do it, this the mayor's responsible, like people are going to say, plans from 15 years ago, that could have been, other people are like, no, it's the same mayor. Like that's too much of a mental leap. And so a big part is just like starting to associate this in and just kind of reminding people, hey, this exists. And to the kind of the core point, it's not about the elected officials or even the city engineer. It's about everybody else in your community, because eventually it gets to be a point where everyone else in the community says, cool, this mayor is terrible. Next time we're electing people, maybe we'll pick someone who actually does the job. And when it comes to funding it, they'll say, okay, well, we actually want this to happen. So that's a great question. That's a really classic issue.
Thank you so much. And we've been talking a lot about unifying, finding your neighbors to move forward with issues. Jen asks an interesting question that kind of goes against that, about how do we unify? I've been thinking about different option or opinions people who are sold on cycling have as the kind of infrastructure and policies to advocate for. How do we build a consensus within to have more leverage with decision makers and neighbors to have more effective change?
Yes, the consensus question is a whole thing, because to just tie this up a little bit, let's say if you're actually connecting these things in, let's say if you say, oh, well, I'm the bike person, I represent all the bike people, they're on my side, and we all want this bike plan. And then there's somebody else in your community who says, I also bike, and I think this plan is terrible. Then the mayor gets to say, oh, community's divided, I don't have to do nothing. And they get to pat themselves on the back and go about it. Now, there's a few things to this. One is, if you do make it where it's literally everyone in your community who rides a bike versus one person, one schmo who also rides a bike, like you could be like, no, that person's a weird crank and we're the side. So like there's one level of like I think sometimes our community, very broadly speaking, is very focused on consensus because it feels like, look, we're just 4 people. There's only 4 people in this town of 50,000 who care, and it's really nice if all 4 of us are in agreement. And it's like, well, actually, there's whatever the math is, nearly 50,000 other people who have no opinion. And sometimes it's a lot easier, rather than change one person's mind, to get another 100 people to agree with you. And you form consensus by just expanding the conversation type of thing. So one, just that is a way of doing this, of saying, cool, there's that person, and especially not knowing your particular situation, sometimes people are who are hard to get along with are not just hard to get along with you, but with everybody else. And so if you make a good coalition of all the great people who want all the nice good things, and then there's one random person who is yelling at everybody else, that actually still makes you look pretty good. So that part. But then, okay, if we're assuming like, no, that person is arguing in good faith and we just do have different opinions, you have, and this is, as you can see, like, oh, this is why this book was twice as long as originally. Um, if you are of different opinions and you really do want to get to consensus, a big thing is figuring out what you actually have consensus on. Like you do have some stuff. And it could be we need to be teaching kids how to ride bikes. And some people might say it's immoral and terrible to teach kids to ride bikes, kids or whatever. I don't know who would say such a thing, but the world's a big place. People say all sorts of things. But so one part is like finding where that consensus is. Because the other part of that is when it comes to having that argument, that discussion, coming to a political understanding or that mutualism, very rarely. I do a lot of these talks, I do a lot of trainings, I've been doing a lot of advocacy. I have never been in part of a conversation where someone said, "Oh my God, you're right. I'm terrible. I'm wrong. I suck. Okay, I now believe the thing that you think." Like winning them over just on a personal level where someone could be like, "Look, I think speed bumps are the devil and they're going to kill us all in our sleep and blah, 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 or whatever. You're like, okay, cool, but let's do this one thing. And then you can start building respect or mutualism, just like camaraderie around this. And maybe you say, okay, well, now let's start working on this other thing of county road, this rail line should be converted, like a abandoned rail track should be converted to a bike path, which is also really controversial depending on your community. Like finding the other thing. And eventually maybe you get to the point where there's still just this point of contention, but what you'll probably do is build enough community, enough going on that if you're on the side that's right, it's not you and Dave or whoever having that contention. Now it's a ton of other people in your group are doing it. And some people have said, look, like just to name this more explicitly as a local example, being recorded, so no names, in a nearby Bay Area county, there is a small bike advocacy group, and there's a person in the group who does come from the background of vehicular cycling, wears the Lycra, and is not a fan of concrete. And he has said, look, I recognize I'm the only one in our crew who does this, and I have this I have an outdated mentality, and so the group wants to do it. I'm not going to pass out flyers for this. I'm going to do the other thing, but like whatever. And that's, for the people who do like concrete, that's a great victory. That's what that looks like. And maybe you're coming at this other way, but like it's about having how do you get into like maybe unity of action even if you can't get unity of theory. So gigantic question. Love that question. Wrote a whole book about this type of stuff because it's such a good question.
Great, thank you. So now, kind of moving forward, let's say we have our group and we all want to fight for a cause. Dave asks, how do we pick the size of an ask? Should we, for example, for elementary and middle school, should we ask for on-site parking or should we go more vague and just ask for road modifications? How far do you go with your ask?
Yeah, I mean, so you don't get what you don't ask for. No one's ever going to say, you were so polite, you get 2 scoops of ice cream. Like that just doesn't happen. So at the one level, there's always that. I think the other part is, and this, as chapter 3 does, like totally community dependent because, who knows what just happened 2 years ago, and maybe you just won a huge thing, and now is the time to solidify your wins. The thing I was talking about in chapter 2 and 3, the thing I'm a huge fan of is having multiple asks out at different levels of government. Then you say, okay, well, I'm asking, like, I don't need the school superintendent to get the bike racks. I just need the principal to get the bike rack. So I'm going to ask the principal, hey, I need the bike rack. And it's actually not the school superintendent who does the road stuff. I'm going to ask the mayor for the road stuff and say, hey, school board, can you sign on to this thing? And so kind of recognizing that you can have multiple asks at different times is very helpful. And also something I think is very important about it is it's people, you always want people to be in the hot seat. Like you don't want them to be like, oh, well, I did that thing 3 years ago. Those bike people love me. I'm fine. And the more that you build a habit of like, cool, that was great. And now we'd like this other thing. And yeah, that was so good. Here's a smaller ask, and that like it helps politicians realize like, oh, they should always be thinking about this stuff, or they should be thinking about it each time, because you don't get, as I said, like you don't get two bites if like if this year you're quiet and next year you're loud, they don't say, oh, thanks for being quiet. Um, Occasionally they will say, hey, last year you got everything you wanted. This year, nothing. We're going to focus on this whole other issue. And you say, great, can you endorse this other thing? And like this is this larger point about this. Sometimes the ask that you have of a mayor or elected official or whatever is, hey, can you ask the governor for money? Like you might say to the point like, oh, the town says they don't have money for the plan. And they do, and there's money, and they talk about that in chapter 2 and 3 specifically. There's money. But even if you're like, fine, I'll accept it. Say, hey, mayor, will you endorse this letter to the state rep saying, hi, we'd like money for this program so we get the plan? And that's the way the mayor saying, okay, so you're not saying me. It's no, not your money, their money. It's our money collectively. And then, do that and maybe you win and that's great. But then also you say, oh, cool, the mayor is now on the record of advocating for this thing. Now the mayor is like extra pro this plan. And you can start using it as like, okay, well, now the state didn't come up with it. The state came up with half. You did support this. You got all the stuff. We cheered you on. You're going to do your part. So there's that part. And so kind of the other part to this question of like, uh, the size of your ask is to other Dave. There's this whole concept of the Overton window, like asking for more than you expect as a way of kind of price anchoring. So I say, I would like 5 of a thing, and says, whoa, 5's only like, okay, I'll settle for 4. And so one part is like asking for a lot is a way of helping people say, like vision 0, like we're saying, I would like no one to get killed. I'm like, wow, no one? You're like, yeah, and here's a bunch of stuff that we can get as part of this. The key, and I use this example in the book because this is such a good question. My skeleton key to this question is think of your ally, think of the person who's like on your side, and what is the extent that, what is the thing that they're going to be like, okay, now you're pushing it, because you don't want to ask the person you're targeting is always going to say no, or not always, but like they're going to be like, why you want no kids to be killed? Oh my God. Like they're always going to be like, oh my God, I don't want to do it. You want me to wash all the dishes? What are you talking? Like, they're going to say no. But so a key part is like checking with your allies, like, hey, what seems to be too much or enough, or what's that level? What's your situation? Like, if we wrote this letter, would you sign on? And that's like really helpful when it comes time to like questions of budgets and things like that. For the street safety campaign I led in Oakland a few years ago, we're like, let's ask for, it was like 1% or like a very tiny percent of the police budget. We're saying this is, street safety. We're talking about violence. We have a violence prevention budget. A lot goes to the police department. Very little goes to street safety. Street safety is a form of violence, like 1%. And that would actually be a huge transformative amount because police budgets get so much money. Um, but just being like, look, we're talking about 1%, like that really helped people be like, oh, is this a big ask? Is this a small ask? And so like thinking about your community's context is really going to be key to that. And then just checking with friends of like, okay, does this feel good? Does this feel like enough? But yeah, tricky question. That's a good one. Thank you for it.
I think we have time for one more question before we go in to wrap up. It's on that topic of money, everybody's favorite topic. Any grant writing advice? Valerie says, do you work on grant writing? My community village is about 9,000, and anything that's $1 million is out of the question, but I want $1 million things.
Yeah, grant writing's tough. That's, I might even kick that. I don't know if like Ride Illinois provides support on that. Um, I would say a big part about grant writing, my advice is there's other people in your community who are also writing for grants. And the more that you could team up and say, hey, we're doing this together. Like a kind of a classic thing that happens, at least in the Bay Area, is we have a lot of like weirdly expensive bike lanes. And it's like, oh, it's not because the bike lane's cheap, but they also did the sewers, or they redid the internet or the Wi-Fi or like whatever the thing. Like they ripped up the pavement, did a bunch of stuff, and the bike lane's the last part of it. And kind of helping people like bring in more allies to that is a big part. And so saying, well, if we are touching the road, we should do these things. Um, and so I think that's just something to like think about when it comes to grant writing. And the other, um, part though is grant writing takes a lot of time, and the odds are very low, especially if you're in it. Like uh, uh, grant programs always feel like they're written for other people to get the money, regardless of what you're trying to work on. That's at least just my personal experience. And so I would say the more work you can do to get your community solidly behind this, so it's not like you apply for a grant, but now it's like, oh, the whole community has a thing, or the county does this stuff, like county-wide organizing is really key, or even your MPO, your metropolitan planning, like every community is in part of this like larger planning district. The more political cohesion you can build around this, the more that the grant is not just like a little extra money to change things, but saying, oh, we know that this is not, if we award you this grant for bike racks at every park and trailhead or whatever it is, we know that will actually get implemented because all these other entities on board. So the more that you can like politically line up that support, the better time you're gonna have.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm going to put the link to your book in again. Please join me in thanking Carter. This was super eye-opening. I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and chat with us tonight.
And I
Thank you. It's
shared
so great.
Carter's Instagram. I feel like you're most active on Instagram. So is that the best place for folks to watch your
Yeah,
content?
I guess it's a funny, a few years ago, I was like, Twitter used to be a bigger thing for me. That is a weird place now, so I'm not there. And I would say mainly my life is about collecting 200,000 signatures for this regional measure to save transit in the Bay Area. So if you see me posting, it is generally because I'm failing to do the work I need to be doing. But yeah, um, but you can find me there. I'll put my website in the chat. And thank you all so much. And thank you also so much for what you do, both Dave and Savannah, but also this whole crew, because I don't know if you know this, like we have the same federal government. I'm pushing to get my Congress members to be good on this stuff and my senators and all that. You also have Congress members. You also have senators. So like I want you to win locally for a lot of reasons, but also that helps us when we win the big fight. There's the Surface Transportation Reauthorization Act. There's this whole thing going on. And so the more that we build locally to win our fights, the more success we will have when it comes time to yell at Washington, D.C. to do good stuff. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I have a couple points, and make sure to stick around because we will be doing a raffle for everybody here. We're giving away 2 of Carter's books. Let me share real quick. Just gonna plug a couple things, some upcoming Ride Illinois events. We have our lobby day booked and ready. So now that we're on the topic of advocacy, you can be a part of that with Ride Illinois this April 17th in Springfield. We also have our annual member meeting in April, an unconfirmed date yet, where you can help vote with our board. If you scan that QR code, you have the option to become a member, and all members are invited to kind of give your say on what's going on in your community, and we can give you some updates on what Ride Illinois has been doing. And then our Grand Illinois Bike Tour in June, where we'll be in the Metro East section. Then just some general contact information. If you want to follow up with Ride Illinois, stay connected with all of our social medias. We'd love to keep the conversation going. And then I think we're ready for the raffle. Everybody's ready. Everybody here is entered. Everybody can see that. We'll give it a spin. And then I will email you. I'll send you a follow-up email to get your mailing address so we can get you guys sent the book.
And Wheel of Names is where it's at. I think we've done it before because it's just kind of fun.
Hey, our first winner is Philip. Let me write your name
Oh,
down.
my God, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for being here.
Congrats,
It was
Philip.
great. It was a pleasure. It was very interesting.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. Looking forward to reading.
Thank you.
See who's joining you in being a new owner of If You Want to Win, You've Got to Fight. I think Rudy has a curse.
Rudy also has the book, so
Yeah.
you can.
This is like the only thing that I ever win, and I'm like,
Okay.
Nice.
And
Hey,
Holly.
Holly. Congrats.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. And another big thank you to Carter. Really appreciate you being here and chatting with us today. Make sure to stay connected. As we said, visit the website, buy the book, check out his social medias. You're doing great work, and I really appreciate you joining us tonight.
Thank you all so much, and thank you for sharing your wisdom in the book. You'll recognize some of the people in it too. Dave's inside it.
And everybody stay warm. Oh, it's still cold out there.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all. Have
Thanks,
a great
folks.
night.